proceed to the next point.
Towards
We should ensure
us.
whatever we see is clear.
That means work is being done. We can see that it is in opposite direction. It is clear.
Hello learners, welcome to the Ministry of Education Kaduna State Radio Television e-learning program. Welcome to the geography class. I am your geography teacher, Wezi Jeremiah Akos. Our topic for today is traverse surveying. During the course of our lesson, we have started by looking at elementary land survey, where we talked about what land survey is, the branches of land survey. And then we went on to look at the types of land survey, where we discussed chain surveying. We talked about how chain surveying is carried out and the instruments that are used in chain surveying. Today, we'll be looking at traverse surveying, which is another method or type of land surveying method. We'll look at the definition of traverse surveying. We'll look at the types of traverse surveying, the methods of traverse surveying, and then among the methods of traverse surveying, we'll be looking at compass surveying. We'll look at its instruments. We'll look at the procedures for compass traversing. We'll look at the precautions you take when you're making a compass traverse. We'll also look at the advantages of compass traversing and the disadvantages of compass traversing. Now, let's go to our class proper. What is traverse surveying? Traverse surveying is a survey method where a series of straight lines are constructed and then the bearings and distances are measured. When we talk about bearings, bearings are measured in degrees, while distances are measured in meters. It is a method of fixing points by reading the bearings relative to one another and measuring the distances between them. Traversing is an extension of the method of fixing lines and points by distance and bearings. The lines are known as legs, while the points are known as stations. Like I said earlier, what we're referring to lines are the distances from one point to another, and these points are what we call stations, where we take bearings. Now, we have two types of traverse surveying. There are two main types. We have the closed traverse and the open traverse. The closed traverse and the open traverse. What is a closed traverse? When we say closed traverse, we're referring to the fact that it involves a series of connected lines whose lengths and bearings are measured off these lines, which enclose an area. It simply means that we have an enclosed areas and there are lines and bearings that enclose them. So this is what we call closed traverse. It said this type of traverse is commonly used in surveying lakes, buildings, that's building blocks, etc. Closed traverse originates from a station, that is a starting point, and returns to the same station, completing a closed loop. What it means is you start from one point, you measure from point A to point B, from point B to point C. At the end of your measurement, let's assume your last point is E. E will now come back to A, giving you a closed traverse. Now, during the course of taking closed traverse, we have what can occur. We call it an error of closure. What is error of closure? This is a failure of the endpoint of a closed traverse to fall exactly on the point of origin of the traverse. The error can only be known when the field details are plotted. What this means is that when you are plotting your closed traverse from point A to B, B to C, and you finally get to the last point, which is E, you want to close it E to A. By the time you take your measurement in the field and you now start plotting it on paper, point E does not meet exactly at the station A. That is what we call error of closure. What then are the sources of this error of closure? We have one, taking wrong bearings. Remember, your bearings are your measurements in degrees. If you don't take it properly, it can lead to error of closure. Number two, using faulty instruments. When you pick up your instruments and you do not check them before going into the field, it is possible that your instruments will be faulty, thereby giving you wrong measurements. Number three, possible effects on magnetic compass by magnetic materials. Now, when you're traversing, we use a magnetic compass. It is one of the instruments that we use. When you're using a magnetic compass and you stand around, let's say, corrugated iron sheets or railroads or areas that have materials that are magnetic, it will affect your reading. Number four, wrong bookings of bearings. That is, you don't take your bearing measurements correctly, maybe because you don't know how to take them correctly. It will also affect your measurement, thereby leading to error of closure. Number five, mistakes in actual plotting. The plotting is done after the field work, immediately after. So you might also make mistakes during the course of plotting, leading to error of closure. And number six, inaccurate bookings of all measurements. You can also have an error where all measurements have not been booked properly. What then are the measures that we should take to avoid error of closure? One, take backward bearing as well as forward bearing to check errors in measurements of bearing. Now, when we say backward bearing, we'll show you a diagram later that will explain what it means. But when you take your forward bearing, you take the backward bearing because angles in a circle is 360 degrees. So they must balance. Your backward and your forward bearing must balance. Number two, cross-check the functionality of all instruments. Before going into the field, you must make sure that your instruments are working properly. Number three, check presence of magnetic materials on and around the user. When you go to the field to take measurements and you're the one responsible for taking measurements, you have to check that there are no magnetic materials around you and on you. That means your buttons should not be magnetic. You should not have keys and other materials on you that will affect the magnetic compass. And number four, check the measurements on the plan plotted. Once you've gone to the field and you're back with your measurements and you want to plot, you must make sure that your pre-measurements are properly checked. These are the measures that we use to check the error of closure. So that is that about a closed traverse. Let's look at an open traverse. This is a series of connected straight lines whose lengths and bearings are measured. An open traverse starts from one end of a particular road or path to another. It is used to survey rivers, roads, railway routes, etc. It is a traverse that fails to terminate where it began. Unlike the closed traverse that starts from point A, B, up to E and back to A, an open traverse starts from point A, B, and does not return back to point A. Now, if you look at the diagrams that we have here, we have on my far right, you have a diagram of a closed traverse. You can see that it has met on all sides. From the starting point to the ending point, they are meeting. Unlike the open traverse, which is very close to me here, there is an opening because they don't meet the beginning point and the ending point. or the beginning station and the ending station do not meet. That is why it is referred to as an open traverse. What are the methods of traverse surveying? We have 4 main methods of traverse surveying. We have 1, the chain traversing. It uses the framework of lines and stations to set out the area, around the area, the corners being triangulated. Number 2, we have the line and sound traversing. Number 3, we have the theodolite traversing. The theodolite traversing is actually preferred because it is the most accurate method of surveying. However, it is the most expensive method. Number 4, we have the compass traversing. Now, this one is commonly used because it is not as expensive as the theodolite traversing, and it is better, the quality of your measurements is better than the compass survey that we know. Remember, it is not compass survey, it is compass traversing. Let's look at compass traversing in detail. We'll look at the instruments or common instruments that we use in compass traversing. We have the prismatic compass, the field book, the protractor, the measuring wheel, a good memory. That is, as a surveyor, you should be able to remember what you have seen in the field. And then finally, the surveyors themselves. You need about 2 to 4 surveyors depending on the nature and magnitude of the work to be carried out. Now, in this diagram, we can see a surveyor using the wheel. On the next page, we have some of the instruments that we've mentioned. On my far right, you have the prismatic compass. In the middle, we have the protractor and the measuring wheel. Now, what are the procedures for conducting a compass traversing? To conduct a compass traverse, 1, you have to conduct a survey, that's a reconnaissance survey, so that you identify the areas you want to map. Number 2, you determine the layout of the routes or legs to be followed. When you talk about routes or legs, you're talking about the measurements you will take in millimeters. We'll measure in meters, sorry. You measure in this direction, you measure in that direction. Number 3, you mark the stations with numbers or letters. That is where you take your bearings. And number 4, you make angular measurements to the nearest station. Number 5, you also make linear measurements to the next station. Remember, angular measurements gives you degrees, linear measurements are in meters. Number 6, you take offsets and bearings from important objects like buildings and hills during the course of taking linear measurements. We talked about offset when we're talking about chain survey, where we said during the course of measurements there are obstructions or reference points you want to make. Number 7, you record all your measurements, your offsets, your bearings, and all other observations. They should be recorded in the field book. And number 8, you decide on a suitable scale and plot all the measurements and observations, especially when the memory of the field is still very fresh. So that means that you do not give time between when you come back from the field and when you plot your measurements. Now, we need to take precautions when we are conducting a compass traverse. What are these precautions? Number 1, all magnetic materials should be removed from the body and pockets of the reader before the bearing is taken. We've mentioned this already. Number 2, the bearing should not be observed from a position close to strongly magnetic materials, for example, corrugated iron sheets, rail lines or power lines so that it does not interfere with the reading of the prismatic compass. Number 3, the compass must be held horizontally so that the edge of the card does not rub against the top of the compass so that there is no interference in the measurement. Number 4, the back bearing should be taken from the other end of the line and should differ from the forward by exactly 180 degrees. Now we'll show you a diagram of the back bearing and the front bearing. Point B here is a station. Point A is also another station. On point B, you see 80 degrees using a protractor. That is the measurement of the back bearing. While on point A, you have the forward bearing or the forward bearing. So that is how the measurements are taken. And the back bearing and the forward bearing would have a difference of 180 degrees. Now we'll look at the advantages and disadvantages of the compass traversing. We'll start with advantages. We have 1, it can be used to survey a very large area. Unlike chain surveying and other methods of survey, the compass traversing can be used to survey a very large area because it is able to overlook some obstructions. Number 2, it provides an accurate method of surveying the land. When we're surveying a land, it is best to use a compass traversing because it gives you accurate measurements. The measurements are very realistic. Number 3, it can be used in areas where there are obstructions or obstacles like rivers, buildings, and hills. Because of the high grade of the equipment that are used, you can use it in areas that have obstructions. So there's no problem with that. Number 4, detailed information can easily be derived. They are high-tech equipments, high-grade instruments, so you get more information with less stress. Number 5, traverse surveying is fast, efficient, and easy. It is fast, it is efficient, that means you get your measurements, like we said, accurate readings, and it is easy. It is not as stressful as other methods where you have to keep on dragging heavy equipments. What then are the disadvantages of compass traversing? Number 1, the instruments used are more expensive when compared with chain surveying. In chain surveying, although our instruments are cheap and they're quite heavy to carry around, but in traverse surveying it is easier. The challenge with compass traversing is that the equipment are quite expensive. Number 2, we require technical experts, that is the surveyors. They are not easily available to make proper use of the equipment. Number 3, its uses are complex as sophisticated equipments are used. Because the equipments are sophisticated, there are complex uses for it. Like when you have the compass, the different kinds of compass, there's a prismatic compass, there's a magnetic compass, depending on the nature of the work that you're going to carry out. Now, this is what we've done for today. However, let's have a brief look at what we've done so that we'll refresh our memories and we'll be able to retain our lesson. We started by defining traverse surveying, where we said it is a method where a series of straight lines are constructed and then the bearings and distances are measured. For emphasis, we said you pick a station, that is points, and then you have legs or lengths. The points are measured, giving you bearings, which is in degrees, and the legs are measured in meters, giving you distance. So when you're conducting a traverse survey, you take a bearing and then you take distance measurements, all right? And then we said that we have two main types of traverse surveying, the closed traverse and the open traverse. We also talked about, during the course of talking about the closed traverse, where we said the main thing is that the closed traverse originates from a station and returns to the same station, completing a closed loop. And we also said that during the course of a closed traverse, something occurs which we call the error of closure. Now, we said it is a failure of the endpoint of a closed traverse to fall exactly on the point of origin of the traverse. And you can only see this error of closure when the measurements have been plotted. And we said there are ways in which these errors are generated. We said they include taking the wrong bearings, using faulty instruments, wrong bookings of bearing, mistakes in actual plotting, that is in the plotting of your measurements, and inaccurate bookings of all measurements. We also said that even though these errors occur and we've been able to identify where they are occurring from, they can be taken care of. You can have steps to check so that these errors do not occur. And these steps include: 1, take backward bearing as well as forward bearing to check errors in measurements of bearing. And then we say you should cross-check the functionality of your instruments before you take them out to the field. So also say you should check the presence of magnetic materials both on the user, that is the surveyor taking the measurements, and the environment, so that you avoid interference. And then we say check the measurements on the plan that has been plotted. After that, we looked at the open traverse, and we said that the open traverse is a traverse that fails to terminate where it begins. Unlike the closed traverse that starts from point A, B, up to E and back to A, the open traverse does not go back to its starting station. I will now show you diagrams of the closed traverse and the open traverse. We now went on to look at the methods of traverse surveying. We said there are 4 main methods of traverse surveying. We mentioned them as chain surveying and chain traversing, line and sound traversing, theodolite traversing, and the compass traversing. We said the theodolite traversing is the most accurate, however, it is the most expensive. Therefore, the favorable one to use will be the compass traversing. We now looked at the instruments used in compass traversing, which includes the prismatic compass, the protractor, the measuring wheel, the surveyor's memory, and the surveyor themselves. Now, we also looked at the advantages and disadvantages. With that, we've come to the end of our lesson. However, before we go, we'd like to give you an assignment to practice what we have learned today. Number 1, what is traverse surveying? What is traverse surveying? 2, what are the methods used in traverse surveying? What are the methods used in traverse surveying? 3, name 3 instruments used in compass traversing. Name 3 instruments used in compass traversing. And 4, state 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages of compass traversing. State 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages of compass traversing. For further studies, you can make reference to the textbook Essential Geography for Senior Secondary Schools by O.A. Iwena. There are other sources you can also check. However, for the submission of your assignments, or you have questions you want to ask me about the lesson, you can reach me preferably via text message or WhatsApp on the number 080-6226-1602, 080-6226-1602. I remain your geography teacher, Wezi Jeremiah Akos. Stay home, keep on learning. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye-bye.